It starts with understanding developer motivations.
Hmm.
And when the security industry comes to me and says, I need an IDE plugin for everything that I might want a developer to do,
Hmm.
it really starts from the perspective of what you care about and not what they care about.
Hmm.
So the biggest gap from my perspective is an understanding of priorities and trying to push your priorities on them.
Welcome to the season 3 of The Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth manager at Escape. Today, I'm joined by Jamie Scott, a recurring cybersecurity practitioner turned founding product manager at Endor Labs. Previously, Jamie served as product manager of security at Redis, where he was an active open source contributor and as DevSecOps Manager at Cygna Healthcare. Jamie is also a certified information systems and cloud security professional and continues to contribute to the cybersecurity community. He co-authors several benchmarks and volunteers as a consultant for the Center for Internet Security. In this episode, we dive into the topic of IDE plugins. Are they helpful or just hopeful? Jamie has first-hand experience trying to roll out an IDE security program in his career and shares his perspective, leaning more towards the hopium side of things. He's observed that developers often don't proactively use them, which raises a question: are these tools really effective? And as always, we'll touch on broader topics like the importance of becoming a strong communicator in security to influence practices without direct authority, and the critical role of hiring the right talent to create a security-conscious environment. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. And with that, get ready to hear Jamie's opinions. Dive right in. Hi, Jamie. I'm very excited to have you on the Elephant in AppSec podcast. Thanks a lot for finding a time and having some special guest on the side as well. Yeah, it's very, very cute one. And it was nice to chat with you as well, beforehand and discuss your experience and how you got, into development and security. And I think you have also very interesting experience how you actually developed, built yourself, IDE plugin, so you can actually understand how developers think and feel and what's important for them. But I think it was like something everyone asked for, but in the end it was not really necessary or needed. So because people did not really use it or collaborate on it, as I remember. But why do you think sometimes we see a really big gap? Like even today I was at the talk and someone asked how do we bridge the gap between security and development teams, because it was the developer who was speaking about security. So how do we bridge the gap? How do you think we actually should think about building something that in the end developers will actually use?
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding developer motivations. And when the security industry comes to me and says, I need an IDE plugin for everything that I might want a developer to do, it really starts from the perspective of what you care about and not what they care about. So the biggest gap from my perspective is an understanding of priorities and trying to push your priorities on them. So I'll give you a short example. When you ask a security engineer, what are your top 3 priorities? Probably going to be something to the effect of access control, vulnerability management, and misconfiguration management. When you ask a developer what are their top 3 priorities, it's probably going to be features, bugs, performance, tech debt, something to that effect. And really, I've done this exercise with developers and with security engineers. And it's kind of funny to see, developers do care about security. It's just not in their top 3 priorities. So what are you going to do with your top 3 priorities? You're going to actively act on them. Whereas things that aren't in your top 3 priorities, you're going to passively care about them. You're not going to proactively reach out, but you will react to them. So I think the primary gap that needs to be bridged is this understanding of economic incentive. In that, first, who's heard of a product manager who's been given a bonus because they...
Well, that's not developers economic, it's product manager economics incentive.
Yeah, even developers, what developer is incentivized to say, stop, this is insecure, unless it's overtly crazy. I've never seen someone given that bonus, but they are given a bonus for delivering a feature that the executive team signed off in blood on.
I see. But do you think if we would introduce a bonus, like actual economical, gains, let's say on the top of just delivering a feature, you deliver it securely, would it actually work for them?
I mean,
Or like a pizza night or free pizza, because I hear that a lot, like how to motivate developers with free pizza. But
I mean, I wouldn't do it for free pizza. I think in Silicon Valley, you're used to free pizza, and I think in corporate America, it's kind of the joke, like, give me money, not pizza.
yeah.
At the end of the day, we sit down and you see Microsoft coming out with like security as their top priority. And the thing that I think is really important that people missed is that they're putting economic bonuses and performance metrics around security. And that's what's going to potentially move the needle on the economic incentive problem and on the priority problem. But at the end of the day, that's something that Microsoft is doing. And that's something that they're doing with large incentive from some of their largest customers, read the US government and a multi-billion-dollar IT consumer.
Yeah. I think the example of Microsoft for a lot of companies will be like too much. They can't do it because they don't have the same resources, they don't have the same connections, and just not the same priorities, I think, as well, which makes it really difficult. But how would you then approach building something like in your specific case, with the IDE plugin? How would you actually start creating something that would be successful for developers?
I think I would start from the first principle because what we've hit is a point of groupthink bias. Like as a product manager, what are you taught to do? You're taught to go out to your customers, listen to them, understand their problems. And what's a security engineer going to tell you? They're going to say, I need developers to do these things. So I need an IDE plugin that surfaces all of the things that I care about directly to them. But I would stop going to security engineers to solve this problem. And I would start going to devs.
Okay.
And what do devs do? I am of the opinion that an IDE is the wrong approach to solve the vast majority of the problems that the industry actually thinks it's going to solve.
Right.
So when you think of what does a dev want? A dev wants to get shit done. They are given a task and they want to complete that task, and they want to do it in a way that makes them proud. And that pride comes with security in mind as well. But at the end of the day, their focus and attention is on, I need to complete this thing, whether that be a feature, fixing a bug, or something else.
Okay.
And when I think of how I would surface information to a dev, well, let's think SaaS for a second. If SaaS is going to take 30 seconds to run across a program, like, okay, fine, maybe that's acceptable if I'm only linting one file. But if I'm going to do SaaS with full data flow analysis, that's probably going to take 30 minutes. No dev is going to sit there and click the button and be like, I'm not going to submit this pull request.
No, like I know at least our devs are not like that. Yeah.
Like, that's not SaaS, that's a linter.
Yeah.
So like GoSack does that, and you can put that in CI, and you can put that on someone's laptop. But if you want, or like let's take SEA for an example. Like, who wants to open up a manifest file, which for what it's worth, devs look at on very rare occasions. Like this is not their primary task. But who wants to open up a manifest file and see a bunch of red squiggly lines that there's all of these potential issues? Like if I opened up a file and saw all red, I would ignore it. But that's not my problem for the day.
Yeah, I think usually even in like VC code, if you see everything popping out in red, and it feels, I think when it's too much, it feels overwhelming. In the end, you end up not doing anything because it's just everything is a priority, so nothing is a priority. Yeah, that's usually, at least how it goes. But why do you think it still became quite popular, this idea of shifting really into developer environment? Because at least right now it's changing. Like now we want to both shift left, shift right, and do like everything. Like shift everywhere is a new thing, and software quality as well. But like, where do you think this originated? Like, the actual in developer environment?
I want to draw a parallel to Agile for a second. We have a good idea in first principle that has been taken too far beyond its first principles and made a process. Like, if we were to think back to the Agile manifesto, what was that? That was talk to your customers, get feedback, ship value, something valuable quickly, and then iterate fast. And what actually happened? We got Scrum. We got a bunch of ceremonies. We've got more meetings than we can count. And it's turned into something that it wasn't originally intended. And like Bob Martin, one of the founders of the Agile Manifesto, sits there and gives this talk about how the project managers took over Agile.
So it's a people problem, kind of, not the process problem, but rather people who are involved in that.
So, like when you think shift left, I think the programmization of security has taken over shift left.
Yeah.
And when I say that, what I mean is the goal of shift left was to reduce cost. It was to make sure we don't find a bunch of shit in production and have to have a fire drill to fix it. It was, let's catch it before it gets to production. And then we thought, oh, what can be more left, guys? Because we have to keep shifting left, right? Okay. So we already got it in the staging environment. Now we're going to put it in CI. Great. Now it needs to go in an IDE plugin. And I mean, next people are going to say, wait for a 50-minute scan as a pre-commit hook.
Oh, 15 minutes is a lot. I mean, at least in the development time. I think like the whole idea is also like with something we discussed. It's also because of the marketing. Like that's what Tanya Janko, she did a talk at the conference a month ago on shift left. Why shift left? It's like a basically bullshit marketing concept. We talk about it, and I guess maybe EDE plugins are also marketing concept in some way because you want to sell it.
I mean, I think part of it's marketing. But I think marketing has led to groupthink, which has led to a problem. And this groupthink bias that exists today comes from the deviation from listening to the people who are industry experts talking to us versus the people who are actually doing work. And security is being an AppSec is one of the hardest things to do because you're accountable for something that you're not responsible for.
It's actually a good resume of that. Something you can't, it's very hard to control, but you have to control and be responsible for it. And that's why you have to kind of just exert. It's more about like influence that you can potentially exert to your manager, kind of, without being a manager.
Exactly. And good security is like good project management, good middle management.
That's our product management in a sense. I think it's similar in a way. Like you have to exert influence on people of different backgrounds without, to deliver something at the end, but without actually being involved kind of in their lives.
But how do you influence? You make trade-offs. And when you want something to shift left, cool. But then you have to understand where someone else comes from. And that's the critical part that still needs to happen in order for our industry to see success with this movement. I would put it this way. In, I want to say 2016, I was listening to Shannon Lietz talk about shift left. If you're not familiar with who Shannon Lietz is, she was like the DevSecOps lead at Intuit, who really started some of this movement. She talked about how Intuit was programmatizing its security program and where they saw success.
Okay.
And I heard that, and I saw a lot of people walk away from that conversation and say, let's do all of these things and shift left. But they took it where the industry is now over-rotated from let's get things done early and identify real issues proactively to let's see how we can get something in our developers' hands. And shift left isn't about shifting accountability. It's about setting up a program and process in order to identify things before they hit. I mean, it should really be that simple. Our motivation should be the cost reduction of security, and it should not be shifting left. Like, shift everywhere, I think, is also bad. But this is, how do I say this? Like, fail fast is catchy. everyone knows this because it's, what is it? When two words start with the same thing. Fail fast is catching on because it's catchy. And shift left is also reasonably catchy. People are looking for something else and saying shift everywhere. But at the same time, they're losing the intent of the shift everywhere is just simply the idea that you should put things where they make sense.
I mean, in the end, for sure. And when you personally like build features with your devs, do you think about already in the long run, how can you reduce the cost of security in the long run?
Yes and no. I would say when I'm working at Endor Labs, we're in a pretty good place.
Okay.
We have linters across the board and we dog food our own product. So like a strategic imperative for us is actually to dog food our own product. So we are forced to do the things that every security team wishes they could do.
And are you happy with
Yeah, in general we are. But that said, like, you see some of the problems with it along the way as well. And like, I'm happy with the result because it allows me to get ahead of things before our customers see them that exist as a problem. So it's like shifting testing left almost.
Yeah.
Using that. But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily like an IDE plugin. In fact, our developers use our product in CI. They don't use our product in their
in their environment. Yeah, so I think that's for sure at least helpful to be counter that IDE plugin, to say, obsession, I would say. But if there would be maybe a kind of ideal IDE plugin, how would you imagine? Would you think it could exist potentially, just maybe a bit more thought through or that's actually built to be useful?
So I'm of the belief no, but someone recently changed my opinion very slightly on it. Founder of Corgia and I were talking at a conference the other day, and what he said to me was, we need to give people optionality.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't want to do is stop people who want to proactively do something or are given a task from being able to use tools that make it easier. And I think that's fair. But in general, most developers aren't working on a security specific task day in and day out. Like, not many people have a dependency removal engineer or an engineer whose sole job is fix SAST findings, right?
It's the size of companies like Mobile or something like that. There, you might have it. I think the most of even like between 1K and 5K people, you're not gonna have it. It's like rule, one security engineer per 50 developers, and I mean it's just not realistic to have someone who just works with SaaS. I've actually met someone I think it's Salesforce whose job was literally what you just described. So I'm not sure how happy.
Stealing this from someone, and I don't know who to quote them. But like, there are companies that live above the security poverty line, and companies that live below the security poverty line.
Okay. Yeah, most of companies are below security poverty line, I would say. Yeah. So it's just very hard to fix, and that's what I think, at least what I've seen in this case, people they are looking for. They're looking for a lot of automation solutions. So, and then the problem in this companies becomes, how do I automate my security to make sure it scales with the number of applications that we build with our developers? So for them, like the key focus is the automation. What do you think is the most useful tool, like for the companies who are actually below that security poverty line and can't afford to do everything and looking like to automate? What do you think it could be the good solution for them?
I think if you're looking to automate, it depends what outcome you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve a reporting outcome, the best thing that I would do to start with is actually counterintuitive at a certain level of scale. And that's where you see security teams starting to do quote unquote security pipelines because they can't get developers to actually put in every single one of their pipelines at scale a bunch of different security tools because the switching costs become unreasonable. So like at a certain level of scale, the best patterns is actually to do everything in CI, but introduce a pattern of reusable workflows.
What do you mean by reusable workflows?
When I say that, what I mean is if some of the best companies, and I'll give you an example, a large financial services company, it was working on a centralized pipeline that effectively said, you call this workflow, it will read your stuff. And then based on environment variables that you put in or specific qualifiers, you're generally running the same pipeline every time. And then the ask becomes, how do I do the small one-offs and the exceptions rather than how do I get everyone to onboard in this specific way? And that way you reduce full switching costs, which are really some of the highest barriers for getting tech adoption. Because I'll tell you a funny saying and kind of funny know-how is the switching cost of AppSec tools is far higher than the cost of any tool that you ever buy from a vendor.
It's probably true, because when I think, about all the tools that we implement, and it's the same with CRMs, like customer relationship management tools, that's actually, I think that would probably be the highest switching cost, higher than the AppSec, because you will really have, the more data you have, basically, the more connections and integrations you have with something, the higher is going to be the switching cost. So with some AppSec tools, the switching cost depends on the tool, I would say, but with a lot, it's hard because of the integrations that you have, and at least the more integrations that you have, most of the tools, if you integrate with CI and everything, if you, for example, for API security, if you integrate with API gateways, right now, with other automation tools for sending actually different calls and creating webhooks and everything, then it's hard. But there are some tools that are a bit easy to switch, and we see that every year it's actually now more and more people want to replace some of the legacy tools, and it's not that hard because they already hate them, so they didn't integrate them in a lot of pipelines because it was just not possible because of too many false positives. But yeah, I think for sure because of those integrations that you have to do to enrich your security data, then when it gets hard. And I think that's probably going to happen with ASPMs, because ASPMs thrive on basically the data that's integrated into them. So it's going to be really hard for all those vendors within the space to actually fight with each other once you lock in one of them. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I'll put it this way. As a vendor, you have to prove two things. You have to prove that you're better than someone that you compete with, and you have to prove that you're enough better where it also justifies the switching cost.
But that's hard.
Yes. Some organizations are good at understanding and reducing the switching costs. But like every vendor is also going to come to you and say, you have alert fatigue. Here's my solution for it. And most organizations are going to be like, yeah, I have alert fatigue, but do I have process fatigue enough to go through this? And if I have too much, what's that problem? So like, those are some of the barriers to innovation in AppSec, where we have to reduce process fatigue. And we can only do that by making it easier to switch. And those that come with mature practices for security. Those are mature practices generally that people who live above the security poverty line live, and those who don't are across the board on.
So you would define mature organization as someone who has enough security engineers?
No, I would not. I would.
What would be your definition for the maturity?
I would say my definition for maturity is along the lines of practice and not along the lines of security engineers. But okay. I'll put it this way. The number of CISPs that Endor Labs has is fairly high. The number of them who are in dedicated security engineering roles is very low. Okay.
Why do people pass the certification then?
I mean, a lot of them came and switched to different roles. Like we have a CISO who's a CISP. I'm one. Okay. I'm a manager, but we're far above the security poverty line. And the number of security engineers we have formally, like dedicated to AppSec, is much lower. But we have good practices. See, I don't think it's about the number of security people to developers. I think it's about where you are in outcomes. And what are the outcomes that you want? You want to be able to fix things. You want to be able to track and report on things. Mm-hmm. And you want to be able to make decisions to switch things reasonably quickly.
Okay.
And what does that mean? That we operate in a monorepo. So we only have a few customizations to make when we switch tools. Mm-hmm. We're breaking builds on criticals and highs and any net new tech debt. And we've got half the linters under the sun. And we know how to use them, and we've already kind of scoped them in. But most people aren't there. There's 100 security engineers because to 50 developers, one security engineer to 50 developers, but like only one of them operates in mature CI pipelines. The rest are working on the legacy things that are cash cows in organizations.
Yeah. I think that's a luxury of security vendors. Like we also have like all of our developers that are incredibly passionate about security, go into OWASP labs and everything, build open source tools that are dedicated to security testing and so on. So I think that's really a luxury that we have, because most of organizations do not specifically have that if they don't have the security related industry. Like if you work, let's say, in martech or even not in tech, or if you work in I don't know, in a consulting agency, like you will not have this, or manufacturing especially, that's what we see. You will not have this how to say, of having someone with the security mindset and having who can implement good practices. How would you propose then those organizations to raise their maturity bar?
Sometimes every security engineer is going to say, I wish I worked in a mature organization, but it doesn't always make sense. Like that level of investment comes with, like, if I'm not investing in a product and it's going to be sunset, and I probably am not going to set up mature security practices. I'm probably just going to do some break fixes.
I'm not sure if it's a lot about I want to work in a mature organization, but I want to, at least what I've heard, I want to work in an organization that has security culture in mind. At least that's what I think I heard, that some people really even quit their jobs at the previous companies because they were constantly battling to get things done, to get like budgets approved, because the organization just did not have that security mindset, and then they just want to go to a different one, which kind of makes makes sense for them, because they can feel like they're growing. But sometimes it's a pity not to think, let's say, for example, for startups, like as not to go to startups because you think, yeah, there would not be security. But I think there's so many things that you can build from the ground from the security perspective, and that could be potentially like the most fun job, because that's where you can actually build the culture that you want yourself, instead of going like an organization, that has it already.
I mean, put it this way. At a startup, you've got the luxury in that you can do what you think is important, and not everyone's going to track. You're just associating yourself with the outcome. Your identity as a startup, like as part of someone early in a startup, your identity is that startup, and you are focused on, how do I achieve a better outcome for this? When you're at a larger organization, you do need a culture to get by. But part of that is your fault, and part of that is the organization's fault. Like if you're sitting there saying this publicly facing admin portal has password 123 as the password, we should change this, and people are fighting you, yeah, there's a serious problem.
Yeah. But I hope now everyone understands, that you shouldn't put 123 or click on the links in the phishing emails.
But if you're arguing like you should have multi-factor authentication on your Disney Plus account, if someone hacks you, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like they watch videos for free. So like it is about impact in some way. I think security culture starts with us communicating. That's on us as a security industry, but that it depends on where you're fighting.
Okay. Do you have a personal story where you felt like I've made a really big impact there from a personal perspective, from a security personal perspective?
In what way?
Like that you, on an organization, for example, that you really felt like, maybe changed someone's mindset, about the security, maybe, but that you felt, okay, I'm making an impact here?
I would say one of my favorite stories is I used to work at a company called Redis Labs. They're now Redis. And as product manager, I was responsible for evangelizing security.
Okay.
And that was educating our customers. And I still feel that the biggest impact you can have as a security engineer is changing someone's mind and getting them to change their behavior. Like, it's not about the things you find, it's about the things that you prevent. So, like, we start with, there's two stories I want to share really quick. But if you start by preventing something, you're never going to necessarily get recognized for this person makes sure fires don't happen.
Yeah.
Like, why do people get recognized? I put out the big fire. But the good security engineer who has the most impact is the one who is silent, that never is seen visibly putting out the fire. So, like, you get more visibility, and it's almost an anti-pattern for your career by stopping fires, and you're a better engineer by preventing them. So, like, I believe that the biggest impact is by preventing them, and you can do that by educating people. So, by creating courses and educating them, I think the biggest impact I've been able to have is by working toward creating security courses for Redis and helping write the CIS benchmark for Nginx.
Okay.
But that's different to me. Like, that's not what's actually important. I think changing people's minds is what is important. So, like, I want to use the example of monkeys and a banana. If you put 5 monkeys in a room and you put a banana at the top of a ladder, and a monkey climbs and you shock all of the rest of the monkeys, what are they going to do? The first monkey that climbs the ladder, every time they'll realize, oh, I get shocked when someone climbs the ladder to get a banana. They're going to start beating that monkey up.
Okay.
And make sure it climbs the ladder. And eventually what happens is this is so ingrained in people's mind that they start beating people up every time they try and climb the ladder without actually understanding. And you can just remove a lot of the incentives, such as that banana, and no one will touch that ladder again. And you can put a bunch of bananas at the top. You can turn off the electricity, and you'll still get a bunch of monkeys beating each other up.
Because they think one banana is bigger than another one.
So, like, to me, changing people's mindsets to say this used to be important, but we've changed and now this is institutionally ingrained, like passwords, for instance. Like, NIST says password rotation is wrong, is probably an anti-pattern, and that changing your password every 90 days is no longer recommended, but everyone still does it. Why? It's because everyone's been trained to beat people up when they don't rotate passwords.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned at the beginning about groupthink, because we're used our brain is wired to the certain behaviors that go beyond, way above, like way behind in history. So I think our society has changed, but yeah, our brains did not in that sense.
So let me redefine what shift left should mean to you, since you talked about that.
Okay.
To me, shift left should be about redefining how we think about security. Primary enemy of security is complexity. Why is that? It's because if you make a bunch of doing the right thing hard, no one's going to do the right thing. So what should we do instead? We should make doing the right thing incredibly easy. We don't do that by putting things in people's IDEs. We make doing the right thing easy by creating reusable libraries that make it easy to do something smart the right way, that has a standard across your organization, and that's how you scale security. You give them reusable libraries to achieve the right outcome that can be interchanged. No one's talking about that. That's what shift left means. It means getting people to do the right thing easily. We should start focusing on how we develop patterns for people. So, like, if we can't do that, we're always going to be stuck chasing a bunch of alerts. What we should be doing is removing alerts from ever being necessary.
Which is absolutely true, but it's very hard to prove. At least that's what I see, because security is all about being reactive, unfortunately. At least to get validation, the budget. Like I've heard, for someone recently, we got an incident, and now I can finally get the budget for the thing I wanted a year ago, which shouldn't be, like as you said, the case, because we need to build and implement things from the ground and focus on software quality and the education and training of developers firsthand. And what advice would you give, for example, to other product managers like you to when they get started, let's say, and they see that maybe for now there is no like really security mindset? What steps would you recommend them to take to actually maybe make the changes?
So for security leaders or product managers specifically?
For both. I mean, you can say for both.
So for security leaders, I would say our biggest pain point is developer empathy. And what we should stop doing is hiring people from network security and trying to put them in AppSec and teaching them how to develop code, because they're going to start from a position of groupthink. You should start hiring developers and teaching them security, because that way you build for your audience. And I think as a product manager, what should you also do? The same thing is understand who you're building for. If all of your security buyers are telling you, build me an IDE plugin for security for your developers, you should stop talking to security engineers and start talking to core developers.
Okay.
So
I see, yeah, which kind of makes sense, because they would be your buyer in the long run.
I mean, part of this is differentiating your buyer from your user. If your user is a developer, design for them. If your buyer doesn't actually want to buy a solution for the user that they're claiming to, that's called not having the right ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
And the reality is if they want a tool for themselves, great. Just recognize who you're building for and be able to look past the marketing a bit, because I think a lot of people are going to say the things that they know their customers want to hear. Looking past that to say what the real problem is that you're trying to solve, I think is critically important. One of the things we always try to focus on is when we hear something, we ask ourselves, who are we solving for? When security engineers say, make it easy to shift left, they're saying, hey, design solutions that my developers will use, because they keep not using them.
Yeah, quite often that's what we hear, either for the developers, they're not using them, or sometimes security engineers also want to have a lot of control. And as you mentioned, indeed, it's very hard to look past messaging, especially sometimes you go on 10 different websites, everywhere like messaging is the same, but the technology behind is different. And because, as you mentioned, everyone uses words that security engineers want to hear. Yeah, these words I just used, and it's very hard to understand, actually, is this going to work in my environment? Is this going to work for my developers? Actually, because they say it's going to work for my developers, it does not always mean that it is going to, because the technology is either just not implementable in CI/CD, or the remediations is just not usable. And it is very hard also from another point of view to actually show sometimes the real value and fight the giants like Microsoft as well, and the agenda that they spread. And there is always a question I ask on a podcast: if you would have a book or training tool to recommend, what would it be?
I'm gonna go outside the box on this one. I think more security engineers should read about sales.
Communication.
So what's the good sales book by this old Snowflake CRO? I've got to look it up, so I apologize. I obviously don't read as many books with names, but I think more security engineers should study sales. They should study sales because their primary job is influence. If they're going to influence, they need to understand the needs of the people who they are trying to influence and then fill those gaps. That's what sales is all about. And we can't push. And why does sales get a bad rap? Because people sometimes feel like salespeople are trying to push their solution on them. That's bad sales. Good sales is, if you ask someone, sell you this pen, that's not a bad salesperson is going to immediately be like, this is an AI powered pen.
Yeah, all right. You give a piece of paper and then you write. Yeah.
A good salesperson is going to say, hey, why do you need a pen? Why are you in the market for a pen? Are you even looking for a pen? That's what good sales is. In order to shift to the groupthink mindset that the security team has, you should go read a sales book. You should not read a security book. And that's how you're going to up-level security at your organization.
Good. I think, yeah, totally agree with you that it's a lot about communication and influence. Really, like the more conversations I have with the AppSec engineers, AppSec leaders, and everyone who works in AppSec, it's all about communication. It's all about how you understand everyone needs in the organization and how you can indeed influence them. So thank you so much, Jamie, for coming on a podcast and talking to me. It was a pleasure hosting you, and thanks a lot for sharing your ideas. And hope to see you eventually in person to one of the conferences next year.
We definitely will, Alexandra. Hey, great talking to you.